This was a really fun conversation for me because Sarah Buino, who is my friend for a long time now, that is a psychotherapist in the Chicago area. She's also a teacher. She's writing a book. So she's a very multi-talented. She's actually a fantastic singer. I did not get her to sing on the show. I mentioned it at the end, but she didn't do it. But yeah, she's just an incredibly talented person. And she's also the host of the Wounded Healer and podcast. And I have been on her podcast when in the beginning days of the podcast. And I wanted to have her on because we were exchanging some ideas about what it's like to have clients and be a client. And so I wanted to explore that a little bit more. So we talk a little bit about her book that is going to be coming out and all kinds of really interesting things, and get into consciousness and what it feels like to be doing the work, either as in the seat of the therapist, but mostly, what does this mean for all of us to be doing the work, the deep psychological work that we do as individuals and then healing collectively? How do we do that? So it was a really fun conversation for me. I hope that you enjoy the conversation with Sarah. Sarah, welcome to the show. I am so excited to talk to you.
Me too. It's been a minute.
It has been a really long minute. Yeah. And you're one of my favorite people. So you and I were bonded over some shame resilience work that we were doing. And
Back in
so
the day.
back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll circle back to a little bit of that. But I want to hear
Yeah.
what's going on now. And you have a book, and I want to hear about the book. So tell me how it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. I meet with my editor on Friday, and that means I should be doing some work on it this week. I feel like editing is the really boring part, so it's just like not exciting. And so I just like I don't get excited to do it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean we're hoping to release this year. I'm guessing probably sometime in the summer-ish. And it's called The Ordinary Trauma Project. We're still musing over some subtitles there, but it's essentially it's like a combination of psychoeducation, experiential, and like my own memoir story of discovering that I am a trauma survivor, because that's not something I ever would have named for myself until I became a trauma therapist.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so the hope is to help other people identify parts of their story that maybe they weren't looking at through a trauma lens. And so it's less about saying, like, oh, everybody's been traumatized, but like what happens if you just shift the lens of the way you look at it? You have more agency and capacity to heal some things, I think, if we're looking at it that way.
Yeah, so I absolutely love this. And it's interesting that I have circled back to my own kind of trauma informed work and what that means. And I know trauma aware is the new hot.
Hmm.
Everybody's trauma aware. And sort of the difference between trauma aware, trauma informed. And I think, but looking at things through a trauma lens allows us much deeper healing. And I think that education is really important. But I didn't know if you had any other
Yeah.
thoughts about the trauma aware movement.
I mean, here's my beef.
Yeah.
You, right.
Yeah.
We both have this beef, right? You give language to things which can help people heal, and yet people can inappropriately use the language in a way that then weaponizes the thing that you initially like tried to heal, right? And so it's the same as somebody, being a jerk and cutting you off and then saying, I'm setting boundaries. Like, no, you're not setting boundaries, you're being a jerk. And you can use your own like trauma as a weapon, like, oh, I've been so triggered. You can be triggered, but to use it against somebody else as an excuse to not do some like relational repair or like whatever is needed in that situation. So it's funny, like all of this has basically come to light since I started writing the book, because this has been like a 5-year process. Of course, this doesn't happen overnight. And so this has been a conversation that I've had. Not my editor, she's not really like, she's not in the psychological world. So she's not really tuned into all of this, but a lot of my friends that know I'm writing this book and that I've been talking about. So, how do I say more of you have experienced trauma than you know when I'm hearing a lot of people cry? It's like crying wolf, like crying trauma, and that actually being a barrier to doing the work. It feels to me in some instances, not all, obviously, right? Like this is the problem when we get into like really deep stuff is you can't like normalize it. You can't make it like the same for everybody because everybody's experience is different. So
Right.
I'm not speaking if you are like for real a trauma survivor and you're using the word trauma, I'm
Talking
not
about you.
blaming you for that. Right.
Right.
I'm talking about the folks who are misappropriating the language, right? We use that in terms of like misappropriating different like cultural identities.
Mhm.
So being a therapist in a way, like this is a little silly. It's not the same as like being a person of color because these are hats that we take on and off. But in some ways, this is a role that we have and it's a culture that we have being therapists. And so when people who don't know the ethics behind it, like the psychological grounding, right? The research that all has gone into it, using this language in a way to either avoid doing their work or to punish someone else, like
Mhm.
stop, just stop.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. That's your note. Yeah, that's my beef too. And it's so you want people to have the language and want to people
Right,
to, but it's in order to move towards healing. And that's
right.
really what I wanted to talk to you about because I think people who are listening to this show, The Nourished Soul, I think people are interested in their own healing. They've done a lot of things and they're still interested, maybe even have some lingering stuff. And I
Hmm.
always feel like trauma is important to understand and to have that lens so that you can be compassionate with yourself, but also hold yourself accountable and say, you're
Yeah.
right. Like, it's not about saying, well, I've had all this happen, so I can continue to be an asshole or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
right? Like, that's not what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
But you and I are people, I mean, we met at a shame intensive out in Texas,
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay. So you're in Chicago, I was in Atlanta at
Hmm.
the time, and here we are in Texas, and this is what I gave myself for my birthday that year.
Right. Right.
It's a shame intensive
Yeah.
where we are digging into and a small group of strangers are
Yep.
coming together to dig into our stuff. And I
Yep.
mean like deep. And our group was the best group, just saying.
I
And
know.
we were not holding back. Like we came to heal and
Yeah.
we were healing. And so you and I are people who we've worn a lot of hats. We have both been psychotherapists. We both now help other people that are helping professionals. We're both educators and have educated psychotherapists, and we've been the client. And I'm really so I know we're wearing different hats, but I wanna talk to
Yeah.
people about, like, being the client. Like, what does it
Yeah.
mean to do your work? What are we
Yeah.
talking about? And when you start looking through a trauma lens and say, "Oh, some of these things actually got layered in, and my
Yeah.
amygdala was, like, still hanging on to the fact that this stuff was traumatizing, and I can heal. I can
Right.
heal from this." What does that
Yeah.
actually look like?
And again, it's such a good question. It's so layered. And this is the $1 million question, right? So if everybody knew what that was, I feel like everybody would do it.
You think? I
And
don't know.
yeah, I mean, if it was a quick fix, sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
right? Like if it was in a pill form, I'm sure everybody would go out and buy it. But this is
Yes.
part of the problem is that like,
Right.
I mean, that would, I guess, be my number one thing that the healing isn't is quick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, this is now year 8 of really beginning to unfold my trauma story. Year 8. And it's really just been in like the past year that I finally feel okay, truthfully. Because it's been a real deep dive. And I mean, there's so many sessions where I'm just crying to my therapist, like, when does it get better? And she's like, I'll just hold that hope until it happens. But she's like, I know that it will, right? And it did. And now I feel really resilient in a world that is burning. And I am really grateful for that, and also I have a lot of privilege, of course, that helps put me in that position. But I think it's less about privilege for me. I think it's more about having done that inner work. And NARM, the neuroaffective relational model, is a model that I really feel has really sprungboard the bulk of my healing. And in NARM language, we would talk about it as building capacity to
Yeah.
tolerate, right? And a lot of it is to tolerate my own agency, to tolerate, for me, I think one of the it's not quite this simple, but like one of the things underlying everything was that if I allowed myself to heal, the people who hurt me are going to get away with it. And it's not quite that easy, but that forced me to really tolerate, like, so do you want to continue punishing yourself as a way to punish these now dead people? My parents are dead. So it's like, do I want to continue doing that? Or do I want to try to learn how to tolerate my own agency, to tolerate my full aliveness, which was so scary to them, right? Which is why I was punished for it. And now I do feel like I can do that and I'm more alive and I'm not getting as caught up in little things that before would have turned me inside out for weeks. Now I'm able to sort of, like, in NARM, we call it bringing adult consciousness online, to be able to like hold the both and, tell myself, yes, you're experiencing a ton of suffering right now, but this is temporary, stuff like that, that is really been instrumental to my healing journey. I don't think that's the exact same for everybody, but I
Sure.
know for a lot of the people that I work with,
Mhm.
there's a flavor of that with all of them.
Yeah, and it's just interesting that I'm in a similar spot. It's
Ooh.
been how many years since we met? I don't even know when we met.
I think it was 2012. It
Yeah.
was 2011 or
Oh, yeah.
2012.
Yeah, of
So this
course.
was
Yeah.
12 or 13 years ago. Yeah.
Right, right. So this has been a journey, like a
Yeah.
serious, hard journey, but also, so I want to talk about the things that would have taken you down. Like, what do you mean? What kinds of things would have taken you weeks to kind of
Yeah,
work
yeah.
through? Because you're also somebody who gets a lot done, is sharp, is speaking. You have a lot of talents, and I don't think anybody would ever think that something was going to take you down for weeks.
I mean, I can do all those things in spite of myself. And so
Right.
I do pat myself on the back for, like, good thing I am talented, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get anything. So, and I say that with humility, also recognizing, like, I feel very, very grateful for the gifts I've been given in this lifetime, for sure.
Mhm.
I mean, an example of something that happened recently:
Mhm.
new budding friendship with a person. We had a conversation. After the conversation, the person was like, "Hey, did something change between us? This didn't quite feel like I was expecting it to feel." And I said, "No, I'm fine. Nothing on my end. I'm clear." And they said, "Well, maybe we have, different ideas of what warmth is." And then they go on to, like, basically just give me feedback that I did not appear as warm. And in the past, I would have taken that in and been like, "What's wrong with me? Why didn't this person feel cared for? I was showing up in the best way possible and they still didn't feel it." Like, really blaming myself. Or I would have been like, "This stupid bitch doesn't know what she's talking about, all
Yeah.
this and that," right? And instead, I'm in this place of, really, I'm able to hold to my own truth a lot better. And the Al-Anon phrase for it that I love so much is standing for myself without standing against others. And so,
Yeah.
being able to show up in this interaction, which is very minor in the scheme of my life, right? But this would have, like, kept me awake at night. I would have been composing emails, like, trying to prove my point. And I no longer feel the need to prove myself, because I just trust myself. And I also trust this person is going through whatever it is that they're going through. And so I can't change that. And I'm not responsible for that. But I spent my whole life being told I was responsible for everybody else's feelings. And
Right.
so not doing that anymore, it causes rifts, because I'm sure this person is like, "Why aren't you trying to fix this?" And it's like, Because I know I'm okay.
Right.
And you
And
got to figure
yeah.
out that you're okay. And I'm sorry I disappointed you, but this is the best I got. And if it's not okay, then I'm all right parting ways." and I say that with all love and compassion and care for this human. But yeah, I'm not going to behave in those old ways anymore because it doesn't serve me, and it also doesn't serve the greater good.
Yeah. That's such a great example because it seems like such a simple thing, but I think so many people will be able to relate to like a glance from a colleague or a
Oh
comment
yeah.
here or there. And all of this, like, I mean, that's pretty brave of this new person, this new budding relationship person to say, hey, I mean, I think it's really brave. Most of us don't even reach
Yeah.
out to say, hey, did something
Right.
change between us? Because that
Right.
I think is a step. I think you and I were taking that
Yeah.
step 12 years ago
Right.
of, like, right, starting to have
Right.
vulnerable conversations and say,
Right.
"Hey, did some," but then there was
Yeah.
still a lot of retreating to old patterns, at
Right.
least for
Right.
me, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I did say in my email, I said, I'm glad that you feel comfortable enough to tell me that this didn't feel right to you. And all I can share is my authentic experience on this side. And you're going to do with it, through your lens, how you're going to deal with it.
which is really adult to adult conversation,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's nice, and I'm just have to say, when I have conversations that I know we're touching on really powerful stuff, I get a little buzz feeling, and I'm getting that
Mm.
crazy right now. Like, I can
Oh,
feel the, like,
yeah. Yeah.
how much growth, how much what this means. Like,
Yeah.
this is consciousness evolving, and that's
Yeah.
what it feels like inside of me, is that we're having a
Yeah.
conversation about consciousness evolving.
Yeah.
And to me,
Yeah. Go ahead. Keep going.
that's the work. That's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I love that you say that, and I get in similar modes in my podcast, and to me, the way I describe it is that there's almost not language because what we're creating is something beyond what language can describe, and so I completely understand that feeling, and I was so what I was doing right before this might totally ruin all my credibility, but I'm gonna tell everybody
yeah,
anyway.
no, go
So,
ahead.
what I was doing right before this, my personal trainer, I met her and, like, if you believe in God, if you don't, I don't know. I still call them God moments because it's just the easiest thing. I was introduced to her because I was seeing a physical therapist,
Mhm.
and we started working together, and we just had all of these like, me too, me too, me too, me too. Oh my God. She's amazing. She's wonderful. Her name is Brooke. And so we've been training together for like 6 months, and she just like tells me about her life while we're training. She's got a trauma history. So that's just like we relate on all those levels. And one day, like, we're doing training and she's like, yeah, I think my husband's an energy healer. And I was like, come again? And she describes like his sort of like process of evolution of waking up to this because he's been very science minded. Prove it to me, explain it to me. How does this work? And like his awakening story is pretty fascinating. So you should have him on the podcast maybe. But
Okay,
so I
will
was
do.
I was just having a session with him, and we were talking about like from our human perspective, it's so small. We don't know, like, why are we here? All of these questions that humans have been trying to solve this whole time. And so we were sort of debating, like, what is the fate of human consciousness? Especially because the US is at this really crucial tipping point right now, do we as a society have the capacity to grow our consciousness to a level at which we can like save ourselves,
Mhm.
because we really like from here the only choices are evolve or go extinct, and I mean that both
Destroyed.
literally and figuratively, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so that's literally what we're talking about is like the evolution of human consciousness, on a Monday morning is what I do.
I love that, and I love we started talking about building container, the
Right.
capacity, and to be
Right.
honest, I think that is what we're going to have to do is to build that the container, the capacity to do that, and you
Yeah.
and I were talking about years and years of the work, and, like, all in. We were not tiptoeing in, we were all
Yeah.
in, because, I mean, I'm not playing when it comes to healing.
Right.
I want as much healing, and I'm willing to do the really hard work, but I do, and I don't think it has to be huge. I think people just have to have an intention to move in that direction, but it
Yeah.
really is about the capacity to be with things that are extremely uncomfortable at times.
Yeah.
Eh,
And I think a lot of it is like the capacity to tolerate,
tolerate. Mhm.
tolerate like what is it that's really coming to my mind? Again, this is like it's kind of like bigger than language, but like I guess it's an it's ego. I've always thought of it as like we have to develop the ego to the point where we're then able to let it go, right?
Right.
Because if you
100%.
have
Yes.
no ego capacity, everything you're going to be feel shame about everything, right? You're not going to be able to take like everything is personal, right? That look from your colleague, clearly you've done something wrong or, and then we build to the point where we're like, "Oh, I don't need to like identify quite as much with this anymore." And I feel like that's a really big piece of it. I'm in this course right now that, oh my God, you should totally take part 2 with me. The organization is called Consciousness Academy. It's out of Egypt.
Oh, cool.
And I again, another God moment, like, I totally randomly met this guy who teaches, nonviolent communication at Google.
Yeah.
Like, "What? Okay, cool." And he's, like, got a PhD in AI shit, but he, like, does nonviolent communication. He's like, "Oh, I took this course. I think you'll really like it." And I fucking love it. It is making everything make sense to me, and so the course right now is all about stages of the mind and how consciousness evolves our capacity to understand and tolerate complexity
Mhm.
increases. And then the next course is all about the capacities of the heart to tolerate love and self compassion. Yeah, I
Ooh.
know, right? I know.
Ooh, that feels like here I am saying, "We're all
Uh-huh.
in," and I'm like, "Ooh, can I do that? Would I do?"
Right,
I don't know,
right,
because it's so much
right.
easier at this point to say, "Yeah, you build an ego to tear an ego down," which I remember years ago, like in EMDR training,
Mm,
and I'm like, we're doing all of that, and you have to have enough
mm.
of sense of yourself before you
Yeah.
start doing a lot of the trauma work and tearing things
Yes.
apart, you have
Right.
to be shored up. And so, yeah, so it's this process, right? And then I'm thinking, "Oh, but the heart, whoo, that
Right.
is really amazing." So,
I
yeah, I'm
know.
all about that, and that
Yeah.
scares me more than
Yeah.
talking about mind and ego.
Right. Right.
Right.
Do you
Not
know
that
what
it's
any
separate, right? But,
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what Enneagram you are?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Are you a
Uh,
3?
no, I think I'm a 7. I'm the
Okay.
worst one. I, like, went
Oh,
through the
that's
whole thing.
not
No,
true.
I'm 6, I'm a 6. Sorry,
Oh,
Enneagram
okay. Yeah,
6.
okay. So 6, so they're really driven by fear. So 6 is a
Yeah,
like a
that's me.
gut, right? That's I think that one's no, that one's a head. That's a head state. So it makes sense that like you're way comfortable up here in the like mental realm. I'm a 3 and that's like a heart state. And so like
I
shame
love the
is
3.
yeah, I mean, we're fun. We're yeah. It's funny. I one of my best friend's husband is a 6, and so I always just like shit on 6s just because
We're easy to, pick on.
right,
Yeah,
right. It's
I
really
know.
funny. Yeah. But she keeps pointing out the similarities between the 3 and the 6 because we're on the same line of
Yes,
development.
we
Yeah.
are.
And when I am in my
Fine.
healthiest, I'm supposed to look like a healthy 6. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we're all on our journey to the healthiest version of
Right, right.
whatever that's gonna look like, but yeah, yeah, so that does make sense, right? Yeah,
Totally.
that's funny. Yeah, but you have so much that I'm like, so many things that are interesting that you've got going on right now, and you shifted your
Mhm.
work. So you're
Yeah.
no longer doing psychotherapy, or you're still doing a
No,
little
I
bit? No.
am.
Okay.
So the story is I sold my group practice because I don't want to be a boss anymore. Because I realized like in this process, what I really want was to help therapists heal, and I can't do that as their boss.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So I sold the practice. I am still seeing like I only had a caseload of like 6 to 8. And so I still see those 6 to 8 people through the practice. But now I'm focused on consulting and coaching for practice owners, for therapists who want to be leaders, because I think what my role is right now, like this is just what I was talking about with Jimmy, who was doing the energy work on me, was that I think I am supposed to help therapists build capacity and to evolve their consciousness so that they can help prepare their clients so that the world is more prepared. Like that sounds really lofty and kind of full of myself, but I think, that's therapists are one-on-one are really helping the world, I think, because one person ripples out and helps a million people. So, that's where I think I am best served right now. And it's interesting because what I feel like I've been coming up against is the thing that you and I have always banged our head against, is like, why doesn't everybody want to heal as like
Right.
voraciously and head first as we do? And that's what I'm bumping into with
Mhm.
therapists, is that I feel like, and this isn't coming from a place of ego. This is just coming from a place of I've done a lot of my own work. I have a lot of resources. That's my gift, is to give you the resources that I've been given, tried and true, tested myself, but not everybody wants them. And so it's been a little frustrating to feel like the message that I have to share, people are hearing it from a place of fear, which surprises me, because I would think that everyone's looking for hope right now, but I think there's so much fear and so much pessimism, because people have been hurting for so long. I think it's a lot harder to look for the light when you've been, in the darkness for so long, and then the light's just like blinding and scary. So not that I'm like the light that's going to heal the world. Like, please don't hear
No, I
I'm
yeah.
so sensitive to like being perceived as a narcissist, because that one of the traumas that my mother gave me, thank you, was that I'm so full of myself. But it's not coming from that place. It's coming from that.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like I feel like I've developed a pretty wide perspective,
Mhm.
and I'm not seeing everybody else like hold that perspective, and so I want to share that.
Right. Yeah, and I think that is why originally I thought, "Hey, Sarah and I need to talk," because we were talking about client expectations and how I don't know,
Right.
but it's really more about, it's not even so much expectations as a willingness to basically rip yourself wide open and take a look at that. I can't imagine
Hmm.
why people don't want to do that, Sarah. I
I
mean,
know. I
but
know.
it is scary, and I think that we get very comfortable in what is familiar. I'm just thinking, back in the day when I used to teach family therapy,
Mm,
and we were talking about when people, because the whole family will come for the identified patient
yeah.
or client,
Right.
right?
Right.
Everybody is pointing at this person, and that
Yep.
person is the one that's telling the truth about what's
Yeah.
happening in the whole family.
Yeah.
But when people, need to take a step, it's a very challenging to take a step when you feel like you're being pulled rather than supported. And I
Yeah.
just wonder if that's sort of what's happening with therapists, what's happening in the world is that people
Mhm.
don't feel like they're shored up and have support enough to take a step in that direction.
I think that's right. I mean, what I feel like I've seen emerge, and this is from my vantage point as a professor, as a
Mhm.
person who works with therapists. Almost all my clients are therapists,
Yeah.
and a Facebook lurker, right? So seeing what's going on in the groups, and
Yeah.
what it feels like has happened. In the pandemic, therapists almost had no choice but to like throw ourselves into the fire to support
Yeah.
our clients, right? And because this is the first time in our lifetime that we've had a really chronic situation where we're all experiencing the same trauma at the same time,
Yeah.
like everybody burnt themselves out. And so it feels like to me, both therapists and clients are saying, why isn't this easier, why isn't this faster? And because I think at the same time, let's talk about capitalism. Schools are churning out therapists like quicker than ever before. More schools are having these MSW programs.
Mhm.
I don't think, like, very few programs that I know about are really addressing the internal landscape of the therapist, right?
Thank you.
Naropa is one. CIIS out in California, I think, is another one. I know that there are a few others out there, but it's a handful of them,
I
right?
know.
And right, if we're just teaching CBT, I know I have a friend, Charles, don't hate me, but I think that generally CBT is a band-aid, the way that it's being practiced, right? When you come straight out of school, CBT, that's a band-aid. Like, I think we need deep soul work, like not only as individuals, but as a collective, right? Like, white people still haven't built the capacity to tolerate the racial reckoning we've been through. And so there's a backlash against that, right? That's what we're seeing with all this like no DEI legislation. Like, what the fuck? It's just because white people are scared of, evolving to something else, not being able to build that capacity to have hard conversations, right? So all of it.
All of it. I think you're right too that people are, well, first of all, everybody got burnt out. And so it just on the whole, but then we're churning out more and more people who haven't done the work and maybe
Yeah.
even don't totally want to or recognize it, but they
Yeah.
want to help people. Their heart's in the right place. They're like, the
Hmm.
world needs help and I want to help people. And so
Right.
I mean, I think I even probably talked to you after I had to fight to have a wellness and resilience
Yeah.
elective course
Right.
in
Right.
counselor ed program, and it was really thought like, well, that's just kind of self-helpy.
Right.
But what I was seeing is we're putting
Right.
more and more professional counselors, psychotherapists out there, and
Right.
they don't have the capacity and they
Right.
don't have a lot of the tools to one, take care of themselves, and two, to hold space for the
Yeah.
deep work that needs to be done. And I'm 100% in agreement that it's deep soul work that we're actually being
Yeah.
asked to do.
Yeah. And I got approached by NASW, National Association of Social Workers Press, to potentially write a
Mhm.
book about this topic because I was like, if we have a textbook, then maybe we can like put it in classes. And so that spurred me on to have conversations with social workers who've been like doing this for a long time. And so the good and bad side of this is the feedback I got was this has always been happening. So
Right.
it's not a new phenomenon.
No.
Which, that's good that it's not necessarily getting worse, but I do wonder if there's more
Mhm.
because of the amount of pain that we're coming from right now. And it's like, if you take action from the wound,
Yeah.
is that right action or is that reaction?
Right. I That's a perfect question. Because to me, my intuition is that's a reaction.
Right, right,
Right. So, yeah, right, exactly. And I think that things have been done a certain way for a long
right.
time, and so it's just, difficult to get into systems and break things up, and then you're just a troublemaker, and even when people are open to it, and for a long time, I've been saying, and I liked cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, there are elements, but that to me, there's a developmental place for that,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
that's, not necessarily chronological age, but developmentally, there are some
Hmm.
but at some point, and I know I'm sorry for my friends that are CBT
I know,
folks,
right?
right? I'm like, "Sorry,
Sorry,
but
guys.
sorry,
Sorry.
guys." But that we are so far past that. That was maybe what was needed and called for at a
Yes.
time that it
Yeah.
emerged, and we are blowing that so far out of the water now, and the kids
Right.
that are needing help, that are coming up in this new way of living, are gonna
Hmm.
need way more than
Yeah.
some CBT.
And I think, we're in a really interesting time of science has always known that it
Mhm.
doesn't know everything, right? And yet some systems are still claiming that if we don't have scientific evidence for it, it's either not right or it's not happening.
It's not real.
Eh,
Yeah, didn't happen.
right, it's not real, and I think the problem is that when we talk about what is healing, what is doing the work, it's so not quantifiable by science. I mean, sure, I think we can, like, do studies on the back end, but the thing about trauma is that everybody's individual healing path is different. It is individual, so you can't really be like, "Okay, here's the trauma protocol." Like, I know there's trauma-focused CBT, but, like, and just to say too, I have always been a person that wherever I was in my journey, because of my trauma experience, I have always been unable to utilize CBT. It does not work on me. It just pisses me off because you're basically telling me to feel something different than I feel. I needed a modality that was going to say, yeah, these feelings make sense. And let's just be with them. And then like what comes out of that, that being felt, that being met, instead of trying to convince me that logically there's a different thing that you should be feeling or thinking. So I just want to say that, but
Mhm.
and this is definitely not to say that somatic modalities are the end all be all, but like how beautiful to begin to recognize the strengths of all of these and have and teach therapists all of them, right? We shouldn't have to go to 10,000, 15,000, $20,000 trainings postgraduate school to get these things. They should be taught in school, right? Because it is part of the therapist landscape. And I know we can't teach them in school because they're like proprietary things. And then we get into capitalism again, right? But like,
Right.
eh,
But
there's,
we can teach landscape. Sorry.
yeah.
But
No, 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 go ahead.
well, I'm just thinking we can help people with their landscape because we're all
Hmm.
generally we come in with a vulnerable landscape from whatever stuff
Right,
we've been through. So we could at least
right.
incorporate feeling like we are feeling beings. I so didn't want that to be true. I wanted to be a thinker and a doer, and I don't want to feel. But then you realize you are feeling whether you
Whether you
know it or
like it or
not, right?
not.
You like it, you don't like it. And so all of these things that I've now learned that emerge from shoving feelings down and not really
Yeah,
tapping into our emotions, not doing the emotional healing.
right.
That is what is creating in my world and what I see, that's what's creating sickness in people. More
Hmm.
so than any of the other things that we think of physically. It's this emotional, undigested stuff.
Well, emotions, if we look at it from like a patriarchal lens, emotions are seen as not rational, right? They don't make sense, quote unquote, to the logical mind. They're very feminine. Feelings are a feminine quality. And
Mhm.
of course, in a patriarchal society, that's not efficient. That's not going to get the job done. I mean, we know that it will. At the end of the day, you got to feel your feelings before you get to the logic, because otherwise the amygdala is running the show.
Right.
But
That's
that,
right.
I mean, it feels like that's been the lens, and
Yeah.
I feel like there is this like rise of the divine feminine that's coming back to reclaim itself and to really harness the wisdom of, yeah, feelings are important. Like I feel like there's more socio-emotional education in schools now, at least like from the clients I work with who have kiddos, like probably not in every school, but at least someone is attending to that out there, because I would much rather have like a kid who knows how to deal with their emotions graduating from high school than somebody who knows how to do calculus, because calculus can be learned once the nervous system is settled, once the emotional system is regulated, then anybody can learn anything pretty
I
much.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah, it's really about nourishing the nervous system, and I think we need to be doing that across the board. Like, this is a balm that needs to be
Mhm.
applied to humans, all humans,
Mhm.
of nourishing our nervous system, which leads me to so what nourishes your nervous system these days?
My plants. I've
Ah, yeah,
become a plant
a
mama.
plant lady,
So,
yes.
yeah, so we moved just outside of Chicago. So we're like, barely on the Chicago border in this little tiny village. It's a village. Who knew there were villages in Illinois, called Skokie. And so we've got this tiny little house that's like perfect. We have a skylight, sunlight pouring everywhere. I'm looking at my little plant babies. That I think is a big nervous system regulator, because I'm really like pretty much every day I will like take a break from work and just like walk around a certain area and be like, "Oh, look, there's a little bud happening here," or like, "You were longer than you were yesterday." And just like talking with and playing with my plants and the sunshine. Kelly, because you moved to Florida, but like I have never had sun like this in my birthday month before in February. So I am basking in the sunlight over
Mhm.
here right now.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference to have
Mhm.
well, the light in general makes a huge difference, which we won't go into that. And happy birth month, February birth
Thank
month.
you.
I'm
Thank you.
yeah, it's yeah. I'm glad it's been sunny for you in your birth month.
I know, and like
Yeah,
it's really funny because it's been 60 degrees in Chicago. Like
which is
in the
crazy for Chicago.
crazy, for this does not happen, and literally everybody's like, "Isn't this great? We're all gonna die. Isn't this wonderful? Oh my god, the world's exploding." Like, that's what's happening right now. Like, I mean, I will take the weather, but, like, not really. It should be snowing and awful here.
Well, in here in Florida, everybody's freezing. I'm like, "Y'all, it's not cold. It's 60, it's like 50 something
Yep.
degrees and people think it's like cold down here." It's very funny. It's all
Mhm.
perspective, right? It's all where you are.
Right?
So I
Yeah.
love that you're bringing nature indoors to you
Mhm.
and that is nourishing your nervous system. That's good.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're doing other stuff too, like physical therapy and some physical
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
keep thinking to myself, if I had a regular 9 to 5 job, there's no way I would have been able to do, like, any of the stuff I do, but I do PT, energy healing, acupuncture, massage, obviously therapy.
Mhm.
What else do I do? Give myself Reiki, like, all
Oh,
of
yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All the healing things.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think even if you had a 9 to 5, of those things, would you work those things in? What of that would you keep? Obviously, giving yourself Reiki. Would you rank them or
Yeah.
can you even rank them?
I mean, no, because I don't have to.
I know, right?
Yeah, that's a thought exercise I don't wanna do, Kelly. I don't wanna do it.
I was just thinking about people that are listening and they might be
Mhm.
like, well, I can't do all that. Where,
Yeah,
and they,
yeah.
so they might say, like, where would you start? Like, what would be a place of entry? And I don't know what your answer would be.
I mean, with what's available, honestly, like whatever is either causing the most issue that feels like it needs to be resolved, right? Like if it's a physical pain thing, then maybe physical therapy is first. I don't know. Whatever is most accessible and repeatable, right? So, like,
Yeah.
don't set yourself up to, like, go to acupuncture, like, once every 6 months. You gotta go every week if you're really gonna, like, get something out of it. So, whatever feels like you're drawn to it and that you think is going to support you. I think tune into your own intuition. Um, one of my, friends, and she used to work for me, and, so she still treats me like a supervisor even though I'm not her supervisor, but, like, anything that ever happens, she calls me and, she's like, "What do you think about this?" And I'm like, "What do you think about this?" Because it's not like I can tell you my opinion, but it doesn't really matter,
Right.
like, what you really feel about it, and so I think I'd say that to the audience too, like, don't just go looking for something out there, tune into inside and be like, "What do I feel like is really gonna support me right now?" But again, because I think a lot of people are in this panic state because there's just so much happening right now that there's a lot of like, I don't know, I'll grab this and I'll grab that. And from again, if we're coming from the wound, that's not really going to inform you. But if you allow yourself to sort of sit in quiet, really tune into your body, really listen to what your higher self has to say, what does that tell you at once?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and the sit in silence, is coming up a lot. It's come up with several guests that I've had on the
Mm,
show. It's coming up for me of just
mm,
really making time to sit
yeah.
in quiet, and
I mean,
that's
meditation, like, that is the best, and it's free,
it's pretty
and I
mhm,
realize that some people that are in particular trauma states,
yeah.
meditation is not good for, but for the most part, like, there are no contraindications to meditation,
Mhm,
and I'll just tell folks because everybody's like, "Oh, I can't quiet my mind." That's not what meditation is. Meditation is returning to an anchor, whatever the anchor is. It could be a mantra, it could be your breath, it could be I listen to binaural beats because
mhm,
it feels like my brain is being meditated instead of me having to do the hard work of the training. But like some shit has been happening because I've been meditating for 8 years and I'm a different person than I was 8 years ago.
mhm,
Um, and every course that I take, meditation has been a foundation of that as well, which
yeah.
just continues to prove to me that meditation is like literally the answer to everything. So you want a fast, like quick way? Meditation, dude.
Right, everybody wants fast. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned that, and I thought I'm glad you circled back to that. That is yeah, that's fast.
Mhm.
Yeah, and coming
Yeah.
back to that anchor, it's
Yep.
really that simple.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah, because I was talking about relaxation response. It's really
Mm.
the interruption of everyday thought and then
Yeah.
coming back to, a mantra, a word, the breath, a movement.
Mhm.
It doesn't really
Yep.
matter what it is.
Doesn't matter what it is. Right.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, "Oh, I can't sit still," then do walking meditation and
Well, yeah.
just really look at stuff. Like, that's meditation. If you, pray. Prayer is a form of meditation because you're going back to whatever it is that you're talking to God about, right? So, there's so many different ways that people are thinking it's this, like, I'm, like, oming, sitting on a couch with my eyes closed. It doesn't have to be that. There's so many different ways.
Right. Yeah, and it's an ancient form of healing, so why mess with
Right.
that?
Right. It's been working, and
Yeah,
we've studied it, so we know that it works.
that's true. We have studied
There
it.
is
So
science.
science to back us up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for the people who really that's important to
Yeah.
them, I think that, that I was that way for a long time. Where's
Mhm.
the evidence? I'm like,
Right.
the best evidence is the evidence that you feel in
Exactly.
yourself. And
Yep.
so that's really the thing is coming back to yourself, listening to your higher self. And it seems that you need to be somewhat quiet to be able to hear that and have a
Yeah.
somewhat regulated nervous system. I just feel like the more regulated my nervous system is, the more nourished I am, the easier that is.
Yeah. And I guess I'd say too to people who are like, "Oh, my nervous system's a wreck," like, for a lot of us who grew up in really dysfunctional homes, a dysregulated nervous system was normal. And it's really fascinating. When we were gonna move here, like, we moved from the city, and we were still in a very, like, tree-lined street, we had a backyard, all that sort of so it wasn't like this concrete jungle that people might be thinking about, but we moved to an area that is fucking quiet. Like, when the first night we were here, Rich was like, "You hear that?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Exactly." So I was afraid that I was going to be understimulated and that I would be bored or restless or whatever. But when I got
Mm,
here, I settled in a way that I don't think I've settled since, the 20 years that I lived in Chicago. And
yeah.
my therapist said, she literally said, "Congratulations, you've learned to tolerate calm."
Mhm. Yeah, because it's interesting that you have to learn to tolerate calm, that's
Yeah.
not and I see that as learning to tolerate or learning to trust too, that
Mhm.
there's a relationship between calm
Yeah.
and trust
Right. Right.
versus
Yeah,
mm,
so just saying that to folks who, if you feel activated by meditation, then you have not yet built the capacity to tolerate calm. There's nothing wrong with you, but doing meditation more is going to help you get there.
yeah.
So it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to be worth it.
But that's what we were talking about, is people want the
Right.
easiest, fastest, least uncomfortable way,
Right.
and sometimes things are a little uncomfortable before
A little
they're
bit.
before they're better, so
Mhm.
so, Sarah, is there anything that you wanted to share that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure that we cover?
I mean, I guess the only thing fun that I have to offer folks is my podcast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Conversations with the Wounded Healer, which you were on at the very beginning. So I think it was like not even maybe just double digits, I think, when you were on it many years ago. So we should probably have you back.
Mhm,
Um, but so I have that, and that's really
mhm,
examining it's examining all of this, right? Healing ourselves while being caregiving professionals within a capitalistic white supremacist society. And then I've been releasing mini episodes in between, called the Burnt Out Practice Owner,
mhm.
because I because this is who I'm working with right now. I'm seeing a lot of that pain, and I think it's a really uniquely challenging time to own a group therapy practice. And so I want to speak to folks who are really struggling with that and give them a little, like, I'm not alone feeling.
Right, which we know is so important to have that
Mhm.
not alone feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you're doing that, and I love that I feel like you've always owned your gifts, but it seems like you're really stepping in
Mm.
to your gifts, and that's one of the most beautiful things to see. I love to see people who are standing in their gifts in a humble way, but yeah, like in a just
Yeah.
life is messy, the world is a messy place right now. Shine shine the light that you do have,
Yeah.
find where you can be of service, and do the best that you can with that, and while taking care of yourself as best you can.
That's really, like, really touching feedback because you've known me for so long that because that is how I feel, that I am able to own my gifts in a new way, and interesting too that we started doing shame work together. I just put together a brand new shame presentation recently, like,
Mm,
beyond what we learned from Brené Brown and sort of
mhm,
pulling in, like, psychodynamic and all this sort of stuff, and I think Buino is the way he pronounces his name. I can't remember the title of the book, but he's studying shame, and what he says is the not antidote, but sort of the countermeasure to shame is pride. And we think of because of our, like, Protestant roots in this country, we think of pride as being a bad thing, and this has been a real, like, bind for me in
mm,
therapy is to be able to feel my pride without thinking I'm narcissistic because that's what I was told, right?
mhm,
But so this author talks about pro-being pride and the healthy pride that comes as the opposite of shame. And so that's one way I know that I'm better, that I'm healing is because I can feel that pride. And yeah, I'm still worried about people thinking I'm full of myself, but at the same time, I'm not gonna get hijacked by that fear because I do know that this is coming from a place of a lot of deep work, and I earn it to say like, "Yeah, I'm good at some shit, and I got some
mhm.
gifts to give," and I think I want everyone to have that.
Yeah, right, everybody, because I think
Yeah,
we all have gifts. We can't
I
sing
agree.
not all of us can sing like you can sing, but,
Well, true.
I
That's the
mean,
one thing I will never be shy about. I'm a really good singer, you guys.
you are. I was wondering if we were gonna get you to sing on the show because I
No.
you blew me away. We're at dinner, I think, at this shame retreat thing, and you
Oh,
are
man.
singing at the dinner table. I was like, "My goodness, where did where did you get that voice?" It's beautiful. So,
My mom. I got it from my mom. Thank you.
yeah, but you have a lot of gifts. I think that when
Thank
you
you.
were born with that, but you have
Yes.
a lot that you have worked hard to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
But
I
I
think
I I agree. I think everybody has
yeah,
something and what gets in the way of that gift is, some of our cultural conditioning, some
yeah,
of our family conditioning,
yeah.
trauma, fear, right? All of that. So if you do the work, you get to like really have those gifts shine.
Mhm, and I think it's interesting to think about pride in a different way because we think of it as so negative
Yeah.
because there's a close to cocky, like
Right. Right. And I don't we like what good examples do we have for pro-being pride? Honestly, the biggest one I see is Black women. And I realize that's a little bit of a stereotype, but like the Black women that I know in my life
Mhm,
have been culturally conditioned in order to survive through the way that our white supremacist culture sort of treats them like, I'm thinking of 2 particular women in my life, so these women just have this inherent sense of goodness inside of them that cannot be shaken, and it's so it's so attractive, it's so
mhm,
enticing, it's so luminous, and that's like
mhm,
yes, we all need to get a taste of that, and you can only do that through your own work, I think, especially as white people, because
mhm,
shame has been a big tool that's been used against us for most of our lives, whether it's
mhm.
body image or, for me, it was like, you're not like Jesus enough, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah,
those are messages that were, they were designed to control us
right.
from like really feeling the fullness of ourselves.
Right. And you're right. When people step into themselves and feel that fullness, there's such a beautiful, it's so attractive. It's
Yeah.
so the opposite of cocky and like there's a
Yeah.
difference. That is true confidence in who you
Yeah.
are and knowing who you are. And not that you don't have bad days or get shaken, because
Right.
I know that people do, but there's a beauty that shines through that, yeah,
Yeah.
100% agree. That's a great example too. I can
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Sarah, I have loved talking with you as
Me
always.
too.
It's always fun to catch up with you.
Absolutely.
We'll have you on again. We can
Cool.
keep the consciousness talk going.
Anytime.